Great. So welcome, everyone. People are probably going to continue to trickle in, but I'm going to go ahead and get started. Can everybody hear me? Okay. Thumbs up? Yeah? Sweet. Okay. So yeah, we are recording. Feel free to close your video if you'd like. For the purposes of this discussion, I'm going to have folks stay muted unless you're speaking, just because, especially with the idea that we might be out in the world and in gardens, we don't want to have too much background noise. Yes. Welcome. I'm Una. I work for S2. I am a Green Drinks host and an event producer, among other things. I'm so glad to have everybody here. Please get comfortable, get your water, get your tea, whatever you need, your beer, whatever you have with you. Excited for the day we can all have beers together again in person someday soon. Great. Yeah, it's wonderful to have you. So I wanted to, today is called Gathering Place. That title came to me after speaking with Demarus, my co-host, about our having the experience of having right relationship to place and having true, both embodied and thoughtful engagement with the land that we're on. And so to that end, I have a little warm-up question for all of you. So this is going to require you popping into the chat box. So on a scale of 1 to 10, how much do you understand how to be in right relationship with this land? Like really physically this land. And right relationship means sort of appropriate relationship or a balanced and understood relationship. 1 being totally clueless. I don't know. I don't like dirt. I don't know. I don't know what to do. 10 being it's my whole life. I'm devoted to it every second. Pop into the chat and on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being uncomfortable, 10 being very comfortable. Give us a little rating on how comfortable you feel on being in right relationship with the land. And as you do that, I'm going to toss it over to M.
Yeah, so I'm just going to give a real quick welcome and intro to who we are as Sustainable Seattle. Some of you all we know, some of you we know very, very well. For some of you, it's our first time meeting you, so nice to meet you. I'm the Executive Director for Sustainable Seattle. Very glad to be in community with you all today. A little bit about this organization. We've been around for 29 years or 30, depending on who you talk to. And we really started out as an organization that was dedicated to making sustainability a community conversation. So we started out, I like to call it, we took this conversation out of the closed doors. So, you know, back in the late 80s, early 90s, there was a lot of conversation about sustainability amongst academics, amongst government people, amongst policymakers. And there was a group of people here in Seattle that was like, we think that community has a lot of knowledge about this that needs to be brought into the room. This is not to mention the people who have been practicing sustainability without using that word for generations prior. And so the first kind of herald project of the organization was what was called Sustainability Indicators, which was a whole big group of Seattleites coming together to kind of assess what does this look like for our region, and creating these kind of like sets of metrics based on what they knew about their own neighborhoods. And so we've kind of continued in that spirit ever since. We're a nexus point, we're a resource. We have a number of programs that have kind of sprung out of that original vision as things have changed for the region. And this gathering is one of them. So if you want to know more about the organization, you can check out your website. We'll pop in more here and there as we go along, but I'll leave it at that for now because we've got plenty to cover.
Great, and I just wanted to say hi, maybe put you on the spot real quick. Jamila, if you just wanted to say hello. Jamila is our board chair.
Hi. Hi. Yes, I'm Jamila, she, her pronouns. I'm one of the board co-chairs. I just wanted to thank you all so much for being here today, for joining us. You all being here allows us to do more events like this in the future, and it is my hope that Sustainable Seattle will continue to do this intersectional work and continue to support communities and the folks in them in our collective fight for environmental and racial justice. So thanks again for being here.
Heck yeah. Thank you, Jamila. Okay, so as we get started, thanks for all your input, all your numbers. It's interesting to see the range that we're at. I'm just going to set some quick ground rules that I want to hold in this space, just so everybody's on the same page. So our event today is centering the leadership and experience of our guests, and in particular, Black, Indigenous, and Asian community members. So we welcome all questions. There's going to be a Q&A at the end. We welcome all questions asked in good faith. We are not here to debate the expertise of our guests. We trust them. We trust that they are experts in their field. We trust that they are experts in their work. So please come with curiosity, but recognize that we trust their expertise. Also, we want to say that as a participatory audience, myself included, we're not going to expect anyone here, including our guests, to be the sole representative for any one movement or to be the sole representative for any community. Everybody's empowered to speak on the communities and the movements that they feel connected to and that they are part of. But we're not going to expect people to be the only messenger. We do ourselves a disservice by thinking of a movement as a monolith. So let's keep that in mind. I also wanted to say we are, we're here to celebrate and protect and uplift each other's wisdom. And another thing, too, is that S2 has taken the position of defund for SPD. There's lots of people here who are involved at CHOP. I recognize that people have all sorts of opinions about it. Our guests are welcome to talk about CHOP and whatever they want to about CHOP. I'm going to say for our audience today, we are not debating the purpose or the value of CHOP, because I recognize that there's a lot of different, I would love, and I'm sure many people would love to have that conversation more after 7 p.m. Because there's just so much to connect about and talk about today. And I recognize that those conversations can turn into big old labyrinths, and there's room for that elsewhere. Thank you so much. I appreciate you all. So as we're having these conversations, I'm going to ask, especially my fellow white folks, that we just have compassion for yourself and for your discomfort that you may feel. But the big ask right now is that you be explicit with yourself and with your questions about what your feelings are. So I want to, in that spirit, say that this event is all about context and all about learning about accurate context and the leadership that we have in our city. So that leads me into our land acknowledgement. Today's land acknowledgement in particular, we are on, and many of you may be in other places nearby Seattle. So I'm on Duwamish land, and the ask is that everybody take time today after this event and then time following this to learn about not only the recorded history, but sort of the missing pieces of the history of whose ancestral land that you are on or you're from. I'm from Mohawk land. And learning doesn't just mean knowing the facts. I think it requires us being able to draw the through lines to today and how it affects how we have interpreted our experience or entitlement to the place that we're in. So I'm going to do a quick moment before I pass it over to Demarus, who's going to speak much more extensively on the history of Indigenous practice, in particular, and sustainability. Today is about connection with the land, with each other. And I'm going to ask we take a minute to get into our bodies. So if you could all just take a deep breath with me. And really feel where your body is touching the place where you're sitting. Whether that's a chair or the floor or the earth. And I'd like everybody to set an intention for themselves for the course of this conversation. Could be just to listen. It could be to speak confidently. It could be to be curious. Can say, I am open-minded. I learn new things from everyone I meet. My words have value. Just take a minute to hold that intention and remember it for this event. Okay, thank you so much. And as we go on, if ever you need it, just remember to ground yourself in the earth that we're on and the place that you are, the green things that are around you. And without further ado, I would love to introduce my co-host, Demarus, who is going to set the tone for this conversation.
Thanks, Una. My name is Demarus Tevuk, and I am Inupiaq. I was born in Nome, Alaska, and we lived there until I was around 8. And that doesn't sound like a lot of time, but we were always outside, even in the middle of winter. And every summer we would be outside just all day long. And I grew up learning how to gather traditional food, traditional greens, traditional medicine. And we would also spend the entire summer picking berries and fishing and staying at the fish camp. And I was going to say this later on, but I feel really lucky that I have such a strong connection to my home and that I have an ancestral home. Like, I want to recognize that that is an incredibly rare relationship to have as an American citizen. And it's something that I wish everyone could feel. And that's part of what I wanted to do today, is to talk about building relationship with the land and building relationship with place. So I grew up with knowing these values also. Like, we had a poster that was all about Inupiaq values, and it kind of helped reinforce it. And then I moved around the country. First, we went to Vermont, and then Virginia and South Dakota. We went to Arctic Canada, and then Nia Bay here in Washington State. And the reason why I talk about my life is because in traditional knowledge, information comes from the land. It comes from your experiences, and your perspective is true for you. So there's not such a focus on universal truth, or, you know, there are some things that are universally true, but we're able to stay respectful of someone else's lived experience. So what I saw growing up was the values that were on the poster in Alaska were repeated in all of these Native communities that I lived in across the continent. And even though their homes were different, like the landscape was different, the values were really similar to what I grew up with above the tree line where, you know, we have snow most of the year. And so when I was in college, I wanted to explore that. Why is this true? And so my senior paper was about defining sustainability from the indigenous perspective. And I came up with a set of traditional sustainable values that I saw repeated across the continent. And I don't have time to go into them today. I would love to in the future. But what I did was look at traditional knowledge to help me define these sustainable values. And with traditional knowledge, context is everything. And so that's why I will explain where I'm from and where I've lived. And I ended up finding these really big differences between Western or European science and indigenous knowledge systems. And so today I'd like to highlight some of these differences and kind of challenge ourselves to ask what path do we want to choose? What patterns are we going to see after we are aware of what these differences are? So, and I'm trying to keep it short because I know I only have 10 minutes or so, but the first point I'd like to talk about is in the Western or European view of the world, humanity's place is outside of nature. And in indigenous cultures, the fact is there that all life is related. When you hear people say, all my relations, it's a recognition of this relationship between humans, plants, animals, even the landscape. The landscape is alive. And this view of humans outside of nature, I call it a cynical worldview. That's something I would love to go into later also. But I'd like to challenge that because I believe that nature wants humanity to exist, and nature created us. We are meant to be here. We are meant to be a part of the earth. The next thing I'd like to talk about is the Western European view of land belonging to humans. I believe that humanity belongs to the land and that it's our responsibility to care for the land and also to care for the animals, care for each other, care for all life, and to think about future generations' needs so that they can also live in this place. The next big point is that frustrating. In Western science, we are taught that nature is competitive and that all creatures are just looking out for their own needs and their own desires. And that is taught as a fact, but I don't think it's actually been researched. It hasn't been proven. And when you have this view as nature being competitive, you also end up with a view of nature being scarce, that there is a scarcity of food and resources. But I believe that nature is abundant and nature is giving, and nature goes through cycles of gifts. So, you know, I don't have berries all year round. I have them right now. I can go pick them now. So the last thing I'd like to introduce is that in my work, I defined sustainable values, and all of these values, they're positively reinforced. The one thing that is negatively talked about is the idea of being greedy, that we teach our children to avoid being greedy. But there is this history of consumption, viewing nature as competitive and scarce, and that this view of man outside of nature, all of those things feed into the colonialism that has happened. And I wish that I could spend a little more time going into the history of why colonialism happened, because I don't have the exact answer, because there's something happened with some European nations. The way that they managed their resources drove them to leave their homelands to turn the world into a commodity. And the morals are missing. So we have this mainstream system of viewing the land as something that we own instead of something that we belong to. And I wish I had more time to go into things like ideas of like, I don't really like the phrase ecosystem services. I feel like that really dehumanizes the plants and animals that are our relatives, that they are doing an important job. They're doing important work. Like, we all support each other to live and to survive and thrive. I would like to acknowledge the pain that people of color have with relationship to land, because there has been a very systematic and methodical way of divorcing us from American soil, from American land especially. And so now today we have a really complicated relationship with land, and I wish that it wasn't that complicated. I wish it was easier for us to feel connected and to feel a love for the place that we live at. And I would like to try to explain that even though I am Native, I'm Native Alaskan, but I live here and I love the plants that I gather. I love the places that I go, but I also acknowledge someone else has that ancestral relationship to this place. They have a deeper connection than I do, but I am able to build a connection here that is meaningful, but I understand that it's not as strong as the indigenous people that have been living here since time immemorial. And creation stories are really a way to cement relationship to place. It reinforces relationship to place. It connects us in such a deep way to say that we came from the land. And that is a really important thing to acknowledge. And so I have a couple of thoughts about how to heal our relationship to the land. And I think the most important thing you could do is learn how to gather from native and wild plants, because that's a tangible thing that helps you feel connected with the place. It also helps you build that relationship with the plants while you're harvesting. You can thank them. You can thank the seasons and the nutrients in the soil, the birds that are singing while you're out gathering. And when you harvest, think about who you're going to share with. And you should also gather with your family to build those memories of being in that place together. And I wanted to just also point out that our traditional knowledge has really survived assimilation and survived some really awful things, but we're still here. And like when I think about all of the information that my family has about gathering traditional plants, it's really complex. And we share stories with each other about the health of the land, when to gather, and how to store. Like there's so much more that we can learn. And so Yeah, that's all I wanted to say. But thank you for listening. Thank you for being here. And I really want everyone to feel like they belong on Earth, like feel like you are meant to be, and you're meant to be here. And I know that there is a lot of like complicated emotions related to that, but that is my goal, is for everyone to feel connected to the Earth. Thanks.
Thank you, Demarus. I want Demarus to talk for an hour also. I hope that some folks who put in, 2s and 3s in the chat earlier have some solid suggestions now on how to proceed. Okay, so next, I'm going to actually have our guests introduce themselves. And then after that, Em is going to speak a little bit about some of our goals as a collective today. So let's start with Lizzy. So I'm going to ask for your name, where you're coming from, like who you're associated with, and also one thing that's giving you hope.
Great. Hi. It's really good to be here. I was getting so emotional listening to that, and I feel very peaceful right now. But my name is Lizzy Baskerville, and I manage the Danny Wu Community Garden, which is operated by Interim Community Development Association. And I forgot the other questions you asked. I'm sorry.
No worries.
Oh, what's giving me hope? What's giving me hope?
Yeah.
I mean, in the past couple months, it's been tough in this community, as many communities, and I've met really incredible people who have come out and volunteered in the garden, who want to help deliver groceries or just work in the land. And then I've been very inspired by Marcus and Hannah's work as well. And yeah, I feel like it's a time of transition right now. So I have a lot of hope.
Thank you, Lizzy. Hannah, how about you?
Hey everyone, my name is Hannah. I go by she, her pronouns, and I'm the farm manager at Yes Farm, which is a project of the Black Farmers Collective here in Seattle. And I've been working there since January, and it's been wonderful and beautiful and chaotic. I think that the things that have been giving me joy recently has been like the very intentional connections I've been making recently in light of like the amazing organizing that's happening, or whether it be volunteers coming down to the farm or the support that we're receiving. Yeah, I think like in connection in a time where we're supposed to be a little bit more separate has been really wonderful.
Thank you, Hannah. And Marcus.
Hello, everyone. Wow, all of this so far has been beautiful. So just thank you for allowing me to be here. I'm Marcus Henderson, Black Star farmer. Yeah, what's giving me hope right now is all of you. In particular, I'm new to Seattle, so making connections with the Black urban farmers has been, really filled my soul. My connection to farming and to nature, as Demarus hit on, has been very divided. Sustainability and going outdoors is a very wide activity. So to be able to connect with a group of other urban farmers who are Black and love the earth and connect to the land has given me hope and the inspiration to keep doing what I'm doing. So shout out to all of you. Thank you, Hannah, Yes Farms, all of you.
Heck yeah. Thank you all so much. So in the spirit of that, just before we get started with our conversation, I wanted to let you know, thank you so much to everyone who has donated already. We are going to be able to fund all of our speakers today, and we want to fund them more, and we want to fund their projects more. And part of our work at S2, part of my job as a white host, is to funnel reparations and to get these people paid and get these projects funded. So I'm going to toss it over to M. Piro for the specifics of that, but I want you to know that everything that you donated today is going to be split. And we're going to be able to get this event, just this event covered. Let me be clear about that. That's just this event. There's so much work being done outside of this. So, go ahead.
Yeah, and just to clarify, Una, I'm just giving the heads up, and we're going to give a little bit of time later, right? Yes, okay, got it. So we have, one of the things that we're really committed to as an organization, like Una said, is distributing resources, distributing wealth. So we've set up a structure to be able to do that today. We're going to be visiting on that again and give time for that a little bit later. We've been really overwhelmed and grateful for the generosity of those who have attended today to support all of these speakers and the work that we're doing to convene them together and to support this work. You all who registered have contributed about $1,000 so far. And we would like to see that turn into 1,500 and turn into some meaningful, tiny little crowd-funded seed grants for all of our hosts today and our collaborators. So keep that in mind. I invite you to think about what you can do to help us create this kind of spontaneous micro grant. And if you are not able to give, that is valid. We trust and know that this is a really uncertain time, and you can give and be generous by growing the circle and sharing the word about this work. So more on that later, but please be thinking during the rest of this conversation about a number that might be viable for you to contribute to support this work, this essential work that's happening in our region. That's what you wanted me to hit on, yes?
Yes,
Anna?
that was perfect. Thank you, Em. I wanted to speak specifically to Demarus is having us as part of our land acknowledgement. There is a GoFundMe specifically for someone bringing water to the Dine community, so specifically doing mutual aid. So one of my favorite things is funding things directly, giving money directly to folks who are on the ground doing the work, connected already. So you'll see that link that'll pop up as well. Great. Thank you so much, everyone, for setting the stage for this. I'm so stoked. Let's start. Today we have 6 guiding questions. By no means are these the only things we have to talk about. Don't feel limited by them. Engage, popcorn around to all of our speakers. Riff as desired, talk back to each other. I'm just going to hang out and sort of keep an eye on time. But the floor is yours. So I would love to offer it to Demarus. First question.
All right, there's an airplane going overhead. I don't know if you can hear it. So my question is, what can you do to heal, reclaim, or re-envision your relationship to the land? And if you're not ready for that question, you could also talk about your favorite plants and what does it say to you when you have a discussion with that plant? Like, what does it say? What does it speak? What lessons does it give?
I'll jump in. Yeah, let's start with the plant. My favorite plant is blackberries. Hannah's heard me say this before. I love blackberries. I think what they say to me is this idea of resilience and persistence, and also their ability to recolonize poor soils, which is something that we all are in the act of trying to do now. We're trying to take back a society that has been greatly depleted of its resources, and the blackberry is very aggressive when it does that. It comes out with a cane with some thorns, and sometimes a little rough, but then it bears fruit that we can all enjoy, and brings us lots of nutrition that wasn't present in the soil, but has now been made available to all of us. And I guess that's what it would say to all of us: eat the fruit. Don't be afraid to take back and to reimagine. And I guess if I had to talk about my relationship to the land and how I'd want to restore that, I think it's, for me, it's difficult because I'm trying to tackle issues like food justice and food sovereignty. And for me, that means, food production. Like, we need to produce food and get people fed. But I also understand that food production is a very colonial mindset to bring to the land. Even just the way in which we farm, still, even there's ways to do it better, but there's ways in which it pulls a lot of resources from the land. So I think for me, I loved what Demarus was saying about learning how to harvest the wild off the land, and trying to restore native plants, and becoming more in sync and in tune with the native landscape is how I'm trying to engage with the land going forward, and reestablishing those important relationships and knowledge.
I can go next. So similar to Marcus, one of my favorite plants is the lupin plant, because it comes into a place that has recently faced, I guess, destruction, and recolonizes it, and like brings back nitrogen and nutrients to the soil. And it has caught my eye ever since I moved to Washington from California. I lived in the Bay Area on Olone land, and it has just been like a beautiful symbol that has popped up throughout my work in Washington. And then in terms of my relationship with the land, I think that our relationship with the land is part of like building our relationship with the earth, and like not just what can we get from this land, what can we extract from this land, but like what can we give and what can we receive from this land. And that also includes like what can we give and receive from other people that we are in community with, and like how can we learn from our ancestors, whoever they are, and like especially our Indigenous siblings, just what can we learn from them. And I think similarly to what Marcus said, like agriculture just right now is mainly based in big ag, and I think that bringing it down to localized agriculture that is focused on restoration and also Indigenous practices, whether it be like Afro-Indigenous or bringing native species into the space, is all very important. Just like thinking about what the landscape used to be and also what it's going to be with climate change and all of that. Like, we need to contextualize everything and just think about that. So yeah, context is everything with our relationship with the land.
I was going to go on the same thread for the plant, which is my favorite plant is in the thistle family. And I just love thistles because they're so beautiful, but they're kind of aggressive. And they have built-in defense mechanisms, which I respect. And artichokes come out of the thistle family. So it's just like the coolest plant. I love it. And, likewise is regarded as a weed. And I think, like Hannah was saying, context is everything in when you think about what a weed is and what it isn't. Just like the Himalayan blackberry, it provides food for us. And so yeah, that's my plant. And then in terms of repairing my relationship with the land, I'm a third generation white Seattleite, and then I'm a first generation Asian immigrant. And so I think it's time for me to pay rent to the Duwamish, which I think I did once, but I think that it's time for me to do that again. And I'm excited to talk more about reparations in this conversation, because I think that is like a very tangible way to talk about repair and heal.
Awesome. Thank you. I love that question, Demarus. I love the plant question. So Hannah's next. Y'all, I know I said stay muted, but speakers, feel free to have your mics off and just popcorn back and forth. So Hannah, you're next.
All right. So my question for the group is, what are your food sovereignty dreams? How do you imagine food sovereignty will look for you and your communities? And also, how are you strategizing for that right now?
Whew. Oh man, that dream is huge. I mean, I think that dream redefines our entire society. Like a lot of people say it all begun with agriculture. Agriculture was the birth of our whole economic system when we realized that we could, like Demarus was saying, we could take advantage of the land in order to exploit it and gain capital and move away from a trader, hunter-gatherer lifestyle where we depended very much on each other and the land. So I think in my dream, as we start to create food sovereignty in our communities, we hopefully move away from our current extractive economic system and more into like a widely dispersed productive system in which resources like the dollar bill and money and like that form of currency become no longer needed. I think so that that's my dream going forward, and I think that will heal a lot of our human relations going forward because it will bring more wealth and equity, not in the form of dollars, but in the form of kind of ownership and decision making that a lot of people in our society are missing. I think people feel that they are lacking a certain level of control over their lives that's controlled by these like huge corporations. And, we can see the frustration and fear and anger that that's causing everyone to feel, not just people of color, but poor whites and Latinos. Everyone in our society is feeling this, and that's why everyone's kind of coming outside right now. They're getting out of their house and in their streets to fight back for some control over their lives and the ability to not live in a landscape that's been destroyed and to deal with PTSD and mental health due to all of that. So my dream is hopefully through food to heal our society and to live in a more communal way. So yeah.
I think yeah, control and power are key concepts with that question. And I think in a food just world, people have the choice to have a variety of different kinds of foods that they want, and they have the ability to choose, if they want organic, local, whatever, they can have that. And if they choose not to, they can have that too. And that it's all affordable and that it's all supporting, people and not exploiting people, not exploiting the land. And I think that when I look at the Danny Wu Garden, I just want to show you that behind me. I think it's a beautiful example here of food sovereignty on a very small scale, where our elders can grow food from their home countries on land that they can have until they die. And the city doesn't own it. They own part of it. But in the parts where the city doesn't own it, and we as the community own it, of course it is the nonprofit that owns it, we can get into that. But because it is in the hands of the community, nobody can take it away from us, and there's a sense of security in that. So just in like the small scale, I see that here at the Danny Wu Community Garden. And then for the bigger picture, I think, it's about having choices and having more control.
I would like to see more programs for traditional indigenous foods, but I think it needs to be that the indigenous groups get to spend some time working to reclaim those foods and how to harvest, how to grow, and then we can start sharing with people outside of the indigenous community. One thing I wish I knew now is, like, there are traditional plants that I grew to harvest them now, and I don't know where a safe place is for me to go. Not just in terms of like if I'll be trespassing, but also like a lot of places that I know people bring their dogs, and I don't want to pick something that was peed on. So, or was, I think usually there's no chemicals applied in the places that I want to go, but there's also, I don't know if it's safe for chemicals either. I have a lot of thoughts about sharing economies too. I think like we tend to think it's something that's like a long time ago where we don't know what it looks like, but I kind of grew up in a sharing economy. My mom still does it. She trades things, and It's something I'd like to see in Alaska. I know back home we have traditional foods that are fairly easy to gather and to know how to process and stuff, but what's been lost is the information about gathering traditional greens because it's a little more complicated. I'd like to see more programs bring that traditional food source back and revive it. And I know there's a lot of programs that are working on Indigenous food, so it'd be nice to help support them and find them.
Yeah, I would. Oh,
Okay.
the sound is on. I would love to learn more about Indigenous land practices. You know, here at the Danny Wood Garden, we try to teach each other intergenerationally about non-Western gardening, and I think it's kind of hard to find those resources because it seems like most of the classes, the gardening classes, the land practice classes, whatever in Seattle are, they're all the same. And I know that there's not just one way to garden, right? There's like thousands and thousands of years of history all around the world. And I want to learn more about that as well.
Yeah, I think also just going back to the idea of shared economies, that, you know, just speaking to Black people, like the first CSA was founded by a Black man. Like this is how a lot of you know, low-income communities have been thriving and are continuing to thrive right now through shared economies. And you know, food was one of the ways, especially, you know, in the South End and Central District. You go back 30 years ago, and you know, it was all almost every home had a farm, and they were sharing food, and it was the way in which they were able to survive, given all the redlining and all the, you know, economic disadvantages they had. So the fact that we've lost that over the last years is a direct correlation to the land that has been lost, and the communities have had to leave those areas because they've lost their kind of community support networks, which, you know, food and everything. So thank you for bringing that up, man.
Yeah, I think just hopping off that, like, I think just building trust in our communities is really important. Like being able to rely on our communities is really important. But that also, with communities of color, means that we need like land back to Indigenous people, and we need reparations to Black people, and you know, other communities as well. Like they need to have reparations in order to have those resources to support themselves. Yeah, and like in my ideal, or in my dreams, which I totally believe can happen, that we don't have to go to the grocery store to buy food, that we have food in our communities and we can ask for it and say what we need, whether it be food or medicine or whatever else it is that we need. Yeah, I don't want to like ask a grocery store to supply like everything that I eat, especially when we don't know exactly how this food has come down the supply chain. And there's a lot of waste that comes with, you know, shipping in food from so far away. And if we have food that is more localized, we have more control. We have more abundance of food because we can use more of it. And we can also trust our community to provide it. And that could be in a time of crisis or not. So yeah.
Thank you all. I'm just making some notes in the chat. Feel free, those who are listening in, pop in on the chat if you hear things that, you know, resonate with you or that you want to make note of. Be thinking to yourself if there's a question you'd like to ask later. I think it's, I get so excited hearing this because I hear so much alignment between sort of the thought behind many of these projects. But I also know that each of these projects are different and came from different places. And I'm so interested in like the personal histories of those things. The next question I have is a funny question. It's going to be kind of a curveball. It's the S2 question, thinly veiled. But it's what is one thing you wish historically white organizations did differently when they work with you? So I'm sure there's a many. Yeah, I figured that was. If you want to, you can each pick a different thing. I think this is just a really important conversation for us to have publicly.
I would say, oh, go ahead, Hannah.
Okay. So I can speak from personal experience that it's been pretty isolating at white-led organizations. And I've done a lot of it, a lot of internships that were unpaid. So first of all, paid internships, because that means that anyone can participate in your program. And also I'm working for, or I'm getting paid through EarthCore right now, and they're following a model of racial caucusing, which means that we are able to intentionally find time within the workday to meet with the other BIPOC folks in the organization and lean on each other for support, and also have staff members or like higher ups who are also POC who are willing to advocate for us in the organization in terms of what we need and what our ideas are. You know, there's still issues with that because most of the staff who are POC don't have really high up leadership positions. So it's still more of a hierarchical thing. And I think the other way that EarthCore has been a good model for this, and this is a model that was given to them by a DEI consultant. So, you know, they should get some credit, but, you know, a person of color told them to do this. So the other thing that they did was they started working with the Black Farmers Collective and gave them the capacity to pay me to work for them, because before they didn't have the funds to pay someone full time to work for the Black Farmers Collective. So that's like literally giving resources and expanding the capacity of the Black Farmers Collective while also building a relationship that has, you know, mutually benefited the other. So, yeah.
If I may, I would say my experience with white-led organizations in relation to Interim, which is a people of color-run organization, is oftentimes people don't realize that you know, we don't fit into the mainstream, and we have a lot of like, for example, I'll just give this as an example. Our community might not speak English, right? And so for when organizations try and offer us services, they think that they're doing us a favor by providing certain things for us, giving us things, but they're not really critically thinking about their own cultural perspective and how it lands for us, or what resources they're not giving us that we actually need to access them. For example, translators, or for example, you know, transportation to a class, or even just making assumptions for, like, for example, King County wanted to offer us a lot of classes about soil and about composting with the assumption that our community doesn't already know how to do that, and that we actually know it pretty damn well, and we could actually teach the rest of Seattle. And we could get paid for that class as opposed to getting a free class from the county. So I think that's one thing that I wanted to say. And then another thing is that I think with white-led organizations, they know the answers. They know what to do. They can Google it and they can find it out. They just have to prioritize it. So just prioritize it and put in the time. That's all I say.
Yeah, I think that the thread here, the common thing with white organizations, is that just don't. Like, if you don't have to be in the room, don't be in the room. I think that's the biggest thing to know. Yeah, give, you know, support someone from the community to lead in that situation. You know, like, I mean, Hannah money to go work for Yes Farms. Like, that's what white organizations need to do right now. Yeah, step out of the room, pay the fee, and you know, go do the work, the healing work that those organizations need to do within themselves to identify how they're being, what racism is inherent in their structure. So yeah, the knowledge in the community is there. The Black community, the, you know, Indigenous community, the Latino community, the Asian community, are all empowered, are all not empowered, are all knowledgeable and just need to be empowered. So yeah, white orgs, step away, give space.
I just have like a general thing to say. and I don't know, I get worried about how it's gonna sound. So like I just kind of grew up seeing this pattern, like hearing from, okay, normalizing white culture, right? So white culture is normal and everything else is different and strange, you know. I think being aware of that view of culture is something that's really important for white-led organizations to like I grew up hearing people say I'm white and I don't have culture, and I'm like, that we people don't live in a vacuum. Like everybody has culture, so it's just that your culture has been normalized. So yeah, recognizing, giving respect to culture, and knowing that it's not simple. The differences in culture are not simple little things like I like to eat this kind of food and you like to eat that kind of food. Like there are big differences in views of who we are, what's the meaning of life, why are we here, what is our goal with social structure, like what are our values, how do we take care of each other, what's important. Like there's some bigger differences that that are really important to be aware of.
Thank you all. Yeah, I appreciate making sure that we know that as a community this happens in all our work, and that there is real value in just shifting resources. So I wanted to next thank you so much, y'all, for going on this ride. Lizzy, your question is up next. Oh, I think you're muted.
Sorry, my phone is dying, so I'm gonna walk home. So just come with me on a little trip. But
right.
my question for everybody, because I'm also a landscape designer, and I was recently tasked to design something that was like non-Western, indigenized, decolonized, and you know, I'm so steeped in the whatever the norm culture itself, as we all are to some extent, that I wanted to know what are some stories or some examples of how, whether it's indigenous or non-Western or Black or radical, whatever you want to call it, examples of how that shows up in your farm or garden, and what makes it that way. It's a big, vague question. I'm sorry.
In your written piece, just because I have it in front of me, you said what makes it that in intention, design, or practice. So maybe that makes it a little more specific.
Yes, thank you.
All right, I'll hit this one first. So yeah, it started out completely radical, and you know, our purpose was to take back public land and redefine how we use public space. And even with that, we went a step further, and as we after we built a few beds, and you know, we could see all the community support, you know, we clearly noticed that there wasn't enough BIPOC individuals in the space. So we made a bed that was purely for BIPOC individuals, and this just sparked so much conversation. It seemed like, hey, this makes perfect sense, and you know, I feel like the world kind of in some ways pushed back, being like, oh, this is segregation, or like, how could you do this? So it was, yeah, just to see the way that impacted the world and challenged people's minds, really kind of gave us more direction in how we were going to farm. Like our intention is to farm in a way to challenge people's beliefs, not only about farming, but about themselves. And I can't say I'm like a radical farmer. Like a lot of my farming practices are probably pretty conventional, even though in that BIPOC space, you know, we had 3 sisters, and we were able to kind of support a different set of practices because we created the space for those practices to fill that space. yeah, so that is, I guess, my short story of that. Yeah, we'll probably continue and hit that story a few more times.
Yeah, I think I can speak to that. Like, there's a lot of learning and growing happening at Yes Farm, and that I think is really, that is kind of radical to accept the idea that you will continue to learn and adapt to different situations. And I think the other way that we're kind of like decolonized or non-westernized is that it's not just a farm for production too. Like, we're not, I mean, and that is also comes with the limitations of having an urban space. But at the same time, like, we are also trying to build in community spaces at the farm. We're trying to get people to gather. We're also trying to provide educational programming so that people know what food sovereignty is, that youth grow up knowing how to grow their own food, and learn how to test their own soil, and learn how to report back that information to their community, and how to also remediate their soil too. And then also, like, when we grow our food, like, sometimes we get it purchased, but it's purchased for the distribution to happen for free. So, like, we're never trying to just like sell our food for a profit. And that's just our model. But at the same time, I think that that is a way of like providing for the community that is not based on profit or like exploitation. And I think that as we've developed the farm, it's very young, so we're still figuring out how we're totally using the space. But we're growing a lot of different things. We have people from all different backgrounds. We have like Vietnamese and Cambodian immigrants growing with their style. And then we have folks who are, you know, Black, who are growing more Afro-Indigenous stuff. And I want to build an herbal garden in some spaces, and I want there to be an orchard. So just trying to allow as many ideas in that space, and also having it be more than just a production space, is how I've kind of thought about that.
Yeah, I'll jump back in real quick. Just, Hannah, of course, all the things. But yeah, another thing that we're doing on our farm that I think is radical is, I know Hannah has lots of volunteers, but everything that happened in that space was donated or volunteered. I think it just speaks to the power of the community to create what it needs, and not necessarily relying on any sort of figurehead or any organization to define what the community needs or what a space needs to be for the community. That space was a lawn where dogs, feed on things. So, being able to evolve that space, and yeah, there was some kickback from the community, but the general support just showed that it was needed. And, there's something to a system in which there's all these checks and balances that slows down just the energy and the movement of the community to it immediately manifest its needs. So I think kind of, trying to, decolonize, trying to unlock, the resources in our community is how we are radical.
I really like how the garden at CHOP, like the plants are standing in solidarity. I feel like I'm radical in how I approach things. Like, I will gather plants anywhere. Like, as long as it's, there's no fence or whatever, as long as I don't feel like I'm stepping on someone's, like, I go to Seattle on the weekends. There's this corner where I know there's some strawberries growing there, and I'll check on it. Like, I know that the people, they're not even in that house. The house is for sale. So I pick strawberries. I've gathered like rose petals off the ground, take them home to try to make something. It didn't really work, but yeah, my favorite trailing blackberry patch, I can't tell you the location because that's like, it's a secret, but it's in a public place. Like, it's like super easy to get to and stuff, but Like, it's, I don't know, I just have this view of like, the plants are there for a reason. They want me to gather from them. And I do it in the right way. You know, there's a certain way to gather so that the plants survive and come back and are there for other animals. I'm in the planning stages of a restoration expansion with the Common Acres Green Line site. And the current plan is a traditional, you know, bunch of native plants. But what I want to do is intentionally include paths so that people can gather from the native plants. And I want to focus on native berries, traditional medicinal plants, and yeah, just make it so that it's accessible, so that you can interact with the plants. And I think that's something that's missing in a lot of landscaping and restoration design. Is it's not designed for human use, really, and it should be. We need to have people interact with the land. Also, I wanted to say that I really like how everybody's favorite plant has thorns or pokiness somehow. I did this class where the elders were teaching us about Devil's Club, and I can't remember what the medicine is, but when they were describing what Devil's Club does for our bodies, it just made me think, like, Devil's Club has this personality of like keeping everyone, you know, protecting itself, and then there's something about it that helps us protect ourselves too. Like, every part of Devil's Club is covered in spines and pokiness and stuff. But anyway.
I love this. I so appreciate the different perspectives on, you know, like what makes it, like, we're talking about how, like, you know, white culture becomes normalized. And so, like, maybe these things about it that really don't feel that radical to do get an intense reaction. Like, they are, like, extremely radical for a lot of people who've never thought about it. So Marcus, I wanted to pass it to you for you to ask your question.
All right. My question gets back to reparations, and do any of you think Black Americans will ever receive land reparations, and how do you imagine that playing out? And kind of just getting back into your organization, how does your organization address land access and equity for your community?
I could speak to this. I think that I have to believe in reparations. I need to believe in it, and I do think that it can happen. Like, I think that it looks like handing over leadership to not only those whose land has been stolen, to our indigenous folks, and also whose peoples were stolen, so Black folks. And I think that it looks like literally giving back farmland to those folks who were supposed to get farmland. And the way that Black farm land ownership has decreased from about 15-20% to less than 1% today has been really methodical and purposeful, and that needs to be given back immediately. I don't know how structurally that would work. I think it means burning it all down, personally. Yeah, and I think that the Black Farmers Collective is addressing that, you know, as well as we can within the structure that we live in. And I think it looks like talking to folks who have land and telling them, what are you going to do to give BIPOC folks access to that land, and how can we be a part of that and help you do that? And because we know people who want to farm this land. It's not that there aren't people who want to farm this land. It's that they don't have access to it, and they haven't had intergenerational access to it. And so part of that also is creating land that doesn't require you to have intergenerational knowledge of farming. You know, like you don't need to have had like a million years of experience to farm. I personally have had limited experience farming and have learned so much from just like the past year or so, and like being in community with people who have been doing it for a while and who are very invested in it. And so part of what the Black Farmers Collective is doing is we're giving our, you know, farm space at Yes Farm away, not away, but we're letting people use it for free. Like they don't have to do anything to get it. We just build a relationship with them, and that's just how that works. And maybe that model will adjust over time, but that is what we're doing right now, and it's you know, focusing on the experience of BIPOC folks too. And then the Black Farmers Collective is also starting to get other land, like larger pieces of land that's already like ready for agriculture, and we're going to start a program to recruit BIPOC folks to get an acre or a half acre of land to grow with minimal barriers. So we will have a tractor for them to use. We'll have the Black Farmers Collective as an umbrella to, you know, pull from different resources, and that will allow for the success of these farmers. And it also will allow them to, on that piece of land, if there's multiple folks out there, to have a support system. Because it can be very isolating if you're the only BIPOC person out in rural farmland and you don't have anyone to lean on, and the people you may have to lean on are not going to give you that support. So just all of those things play a role in reparations.
I would like to see reparations happen, and I know it's going to be really complex because we've also we've just seen the Supreme Court case give back, acknowledge that treaties have been broken, and the reservations were cut in half and cut in half again. One potential solution is, if anybody knows about I think it's called the Dawes Act. They basically, as a part of assimilation, took reservations and created a checkerboard map. And then here, every now and then, outsiders, mostly white people, they would lease that parcel of land on a reservation. And those leases are only good for 99 years. So they're either about to end or have already ended. Maybe we need to work with the tribes to see if they would want to help with reparations in that way. Yeah.
I also agree with both of you on how that happens. Whether I think the government or globally, we're going to get to that point of where where our government officials decide to give us that land back. I don't know. I mean, it's really complicated because the history of reparations, there is a precedent for groups of people receiving funds from the government for injustice. The Nazis or Germany, paid back a lot of Jewish immigrants. There's Israel. There's during Japanese immigrants that were put in internment camps were given $20,000. Indigenous people have received land in different ways and money in different ways. But it's weird, and I find it strange that Black people as a whole have not received anything from the government. We've gotten apologies, but we have not seen any wholesale action to actually help Black people reestablish generational wealth. The thing that almost happened was, I think, after President Lincoln freed the slaves, he did give a portion of land to a Black community, I think somewhere on the Eastern Coast, kind of like a coastal community, but he was then killed and that was taken away. So that was the closest Black people came to reparations. And I don't know. I mean, I love listening to Tupac, and he's got a lot of great speeches where he talks about the poor eating the rich, and getting to the point, where you've been outside of the hotel for so long or whatever. He says asking for food. You ask nicely first, and you maybe write a letter, you knock on the door, you do all these things to try. But like Black people have been asking for a long time, and I think, as Hannah said, like it's time to take it. And it's also, there's ways that it can be taken that aren't maybe so destructive. Like I think we have a lot of public land here in our society, and a lot of land that's, a lot of organizations can't manage fully. Like in Seattle, for example, parks and a lot of the government organizations have land that they don't really have the resources to maintain. And I think the issue there is, I know Nurturing Roots is trying to get the Red Barn. Hannah, jump in if I remember the name of that, but the Red Barn back. And the reason that they're struggling, and I know what Black Farmers Collective is doing, is putting this land into conservation land and conserving that land, or into community land trusts. And I think that would be the strategy going forward, if we can get access to land and convince organizations like, hey, this isn't like a transfer of ownership, it's just moving it into an organizational structure that will maintain this land for certain purposes going forward. And I was thinking the other day about the idea of like, I don't know, I was talking to a city official about wanting land, and they're like, oh, what capacity do you have to manage land? And I'm like, I don't know. Like, I've been farming for 6 months. Like, what capacity do I have? I don't know, but I don't have access. So that's what I know. And what we need to do is create access. So creating situations where, over the next, 5 years, there's 100 acres of land that is purely dedicated for Black farmers to gain access to and get. So I think creating these programs are ways in which we can, at least each city can kind of create situations where Black and Indigenous farmers can gain the capacity eventually, because they have access now. So I think it's a lot of reframing of how we think about the way in which we can get back on the land, and just creating that access. But we might have to take it. I'm taking it. So we'll see.
Heck yeah. Thank you guys. I mean, I think just to briefly say, I think that we talk a lot about this whole thing where we're like, this idea of like, well, what's your expertise? Like, to have food? Like, what? You know what I mean? That sort of, that's wild to me. So I just want to say thank you all so much. I have a final question, but I'm actually going to save it till later. And right now we are going to get these projects funded, and I'm going to hand it over to Em, and then stay tuned, y'all. I know we're scheduled till 7. I would love if people stayed later. Questions will be open after we do our little fundraiser off. Just to explain what's going to happen, we're going to take this moment while we're all here together and actually dedicate it to going to these links and making donations. Specifically, you can donate to the general fund, which is going to be split amongst everyone. There's also specific program and project links in there. So Em, go right ahead.
Yes, definitely. Thank you, Una. I will try to be tight and quick so that we do have time to open up this discussion to all of our 50 attendees who have joined us today. So please stay with us. But I'm grateful for the timing for this, and really grateful for Marcus's question, because this question of reparations is real. And we've talked about it a lot. This has been the through line all day long. And now is the moment that we get to act on it. I want to just reference, there's a writer named Edgar Villanueva who is also Indigenous from the East Coast, and he talks about decolonizing wealth, and also talks about how, from his perspective, money can be medicinal. And I do think that's a responsibility, especially for those of us here who have white lineage and who have had more intergenerational access. It is our responsibility to pass that medicine along. And it is, in fact, irresponsible not to do that. So, like I mentioned earlier, we've raised about 1,000 in advance, and we're grateful to be amongst people who seem to already understand the importance of that generosity. And we want to get to 1,500, and everything that we raise is going to go to these 4 leaders that we're working with. I'm also going to share, because we also are within capitalism and want to be able to continue doing this work with S2. And it's also important for us to acknowledge that we are an interracial organization that has frontline leadership as well. And we want to pay those fair wages and those salaries and help undo the green ceiling that the environmental sector is severely underrepresented with clear leaders of color, and that leadership exists in our community. So we're going to give you an opportunity. We ask you first and foremost to fund our guests. And if you have the additional capacity to give, we invite a gift to S2 as well. Whether you can give $5, whether you can give 500, if you can give 500, now is the time. And I also want to mention, if you work in the private sector, it's very likely that your organization does matching grants or matching funds matches your donations. If you don't know, we're going to give you about 60 seconds to make your contributions now. If you don't know if your employer does make those matching gifts, I would ask you to use the next 60 seconds to reach out to your HR department and ask if they do, so that you can not only give yourself, but you can leverage industry to start to take a part in these reparations as well. We as a community, it's great, we can provide this mutual support for each other, but this has to be policy level change, industry level change. This needs to be systemic change, that we act today to like deal with the scratch, the bleeding wound, and we act systemically to deal with the source of the harm. And if you are a member of the community who cannot give right now, like I said earlier, we trust you to know your discretion, especially those amongst us who don't come from white lineage, and ask that if you are able, that there's another way to support, that we can share the word, that we can send an email or snap a little photo of one of these projects and text it to a friend or whatever, so that we can abundantly grow the circle, maybe share something that resonated with you today. So I am grateful to have been invited by my colleagues and my friends to score the next 60 seconds for you on my ukulele, which I found and which has been giving me a lot of restoration during this time. So I'm going to play for you for about 60 seconds, and then we're going to return to the Q&A. Back to you, Una.
Heck yeah, thanks, Em. So please don't stop. If you're in the middle of writing in that credit card number, don't stop on my behalf. If you were willing, I'm going to donate $50 today. If you are willing to put in your pledge number in the chat, we'll be able to get a count and see if we can meet our goal all together. I'm sure we can as a group. There's 50 of us here. If everybody donated $15, soar past it. So I want to ask one final question from me personally, and then we're going to open it up to questions and answers. Thank you all so much for being here. Lizzy also mentioned, just to pull it back a little bit, talking about how Japanese Americans who are in internships, who are in the internment camps, were received $20,000 in reparations. Yeah, thank you, Hannah. I don't know, Lizzy, are you here? Are you back? I don't know if I see her. Okay. All right. So thank you, Lizzy.
She said she's here. She can hear us, but she doesn't have sound. But she's chatting with us through the box.
Great.
The chat box.
Thank you, Lizzy. I'm glad you. It's all good. We all have our skills. We've had to adapt so fast. Okay. So my final question is, before we open it up, and folks, you can feel free as you're putting in your pledges. Also, you can pop in your questions, and we'll take a look at those. Hannah Hannah, Marcus, Demarus, Lizzy, if you see questions in there that really speak to you, those are the ones we're going to answer. So my question is, can you just share a moment, like just like a really, because like I've shared your bios, I've researched some of your work. I'm not sure everybody here knows what each of you do. And I would just love to get a snapshot from each of you of a moment when you realized your work was having the impact you wanted it to. Like a little anecdote or a memory, but just like that sort of amber, sealed in amber moment.
So this weekend I had one of those moments. I have been working with building this relationship with Uprooted and Rising, which is a BIPOC-led food activist, food sovereignty group. And this week that they were partnering with COVID-19 Mutual Aid Network to create a pop-up food pantry to serve 130 families who are in need of food. And I think that the really interesting way that they were able to do the outreach for that was that they took it off the internet so that they could reach folks in communities where they have limited access to internet and may not have access to other information, like other resources normally. And Yes Farm was able to grow food and contribute to that. And that just like really warmed my heart because it was also just a lot of young BIPOC food sovereignty activists working together. And we were able to interact with the community in a safe way and in a way where we were able to give them free food. And they're going to be able to come back on a monthly or bi-weekly basis as our capacity increases. And then just anytime some youth come to the farm and I can teach them about bees or plants or whatever, it just really brings me a lot of joy because they are so engaged every time. It's not that they're not interested, it's just that they're not always exposed to these kind of things. So, yeah.
Yeah, Hannah, I'm right there with you. It's always the youth, or young. Like for me, a young Black man came by the garden. It was pretty early on. Things were pretty hectic. There was a lot of energy in that space, and I was also very new to that, and I was pretty overwhelmed at the moment. And I saw this kid. He kind of looked in. He was, man, this is really cool. Like, are you guys gardening here? I've never gardened before, but I'll do anything I can. Like, I just want to help. Like, just give me something to do. And like at that moment, there was a moment where I almost stepped back and was like, I don't know if there's anything to do. And I almost like kind of turned away and like started focusing on something else. And then, something inside me was like, no, hey, this is it. This is why you started this. Like, go talk to this kid. So I ended up, we were kind of settled in our work for the day, but I just kind of talked to him for, we might have talked for like 30 minutes. And in him, I saw the journey that I went on myself. I saw, he was just starting this connection with the land, and, it kind of connected to so many different things for him. It connected to meditation. He was starting to eat differently, starting to think differently. And it just shows the interconnection between all of the work that we're doing with all other aspects of life, why it is important that we grow healthy food, why it's important we have a connection to the land. And it also was interesting because for him, he expressed like just not being able to talk to anyone about these things. Like he was like, wow, you're the first person that's actually been able to affirm these new beliefs and feelings that are coming up in me. Like most of my friends don't even think about what they eat, and most of my friends have no relationship with gardening or growing food, and most of my friends don't meditate. We spend like probably half the time just talking about my experience in meditation and just affirming some of like the experiences he was having while meditating and the benefits of that, and just kind of giving him that momentum. It felt good to give him that momentum and that push he needed to continue down that path. And I think it's those little moments like that where you touch someone that make what we do worthwhile. you know, kind of send a spider web of effects back into the community that leads to the change that we're all looking for. So that was it for me, and I think that's, you know, moments like that keep me coming out here.
My regular work, I work part-time at a small local mason bee and leafcutter bee company. If anyone on the panel wants help with raising these native or solitary bees, let me know. But I do some environmental educator work with the Common Acre, and I can't remember if I was doing a native bees class or a native plants class, but you know, with a restoration site, there's weeds that come up because the soil's been disturbed, and there was a lot of sheep sorrel there, and it looks really similar to a plant I grew up with in the Arctic called, we called it sourdock. And yeah, I looked up the plant and I was like, ooh, this is edible, I'm gonna try it out. And I was showing people how to gather it, and then there was this 4-year-old boy there, and he's like running around, like looking at all the bees, like wanting to pet them, and like he was like such a cool little kid. And I was showing him how you can gather sheep sorrel and eat it, and I watched his face, like watched him put the information into his brain, you know, like solidified it. I watched him look at the plant and like look from the top down to the roots, like memorizing it. And then he was like, this one? And he pointed at it himself. And I was like, yeah. And then he grabbed it, took a leaf and started eating it, like tested it out. And like, that was just the coolest moment of like watching all of these things happen in his head. Like I could see it in his face, you know? And it was just so cool that he was adventurous, and he's building that relationship with plants and animals. And I was really glad that I got to be there, be a part of it.
Thank you, Demarus. So I'm going to read Lizzy's comment in the chat. It says, last year during our annual pig roast that we have in the garden, hundreds of people, almost all BIPOC of all ages and backgrounds, shared food, roasted a whole pig on a spit, and watched Bruce Lee movies all night long. Oh my God, that sounds amazing. I overheard someone say, I can't believe an event like this still exists in Seattle. I felt good about hosting an event that is truly about sharing food and community and land. Thanks, guys. This is really heartwarming. Okay, so update. We're just $200 shy from our goal. We're so close. If you can support us, we just posted it again. Thank you so much. Yeah, so this is the moment. Thank you guys so much. Such a like uplifting conversation. And I feel I want two things to happen now. We're going to open up to questions and answers. And I also wanted everybody to respond to that same prompt I gave earlier, the poll, which was on a scale of 1 to 10, how comfortable do you feel being in right relationship with the land now that we've had this conversation? So there's two things I'm asking. Put some questions in the chat if you have them, and then put in your number, even if it hasn't changed. And let's see. So speakers, feel free, if you see a question in the chat you want to answer, just you can jump right on it. You don't have to wait for me. There, it looks like Aaron has a question. Let's see. Let me find it. Okay. Aaron says, what sort of resources are your orgs looking for? Is cash king? What other potential in-kind resources can people keep an eye out for in their communities that would help? Land, tools, equipment, autos, professional services. What else?
Yeah, cash is always king, but I think what we're looking for as we start to fulfill our mission of gaining access to land for Black farmers is also like a lot of tools and equipment, in particular, like larger trucks being able to move resources around to different farms and to help them out. In particular, for our organization, we're also looking for a place to call home, like a small plot of land where we can, put a greenhouse down and maybe set up a place to store our tools as we start to, work in the community. That'd be really helpful to us. But yeah, if for now, like our GoFundMe is also a great way to help us going forward. We're going to be giving a third of the money in our GoFundMe back to organizations like Yes Farms and Nurturing Roots and organizations like the Common Acres. So those funds will be distributed, and then the rest will go towards kind of getting land and tools and equipment for our organization. So thank you.
Yeah, I would say cash is it. Please donate as much as you can. I think that also if you have access to land or people who have access to land, start to have conversations with those people about if they can share that land or give away that land. I think that would be really important for the Black Farmers Collective to have access to land in Washington, mostly close to Seattle, just so that we can have a network of folks in Seattle as we build our food system. I think another project I'm working on is getting a shipping container to the farm with solar panels on top and a water pump connected and a cooler inside of it. So if anyone has some skills around that, let me know, and resources for that. So thanks.
Oh, hold on. Lizzy said, people power is queen.
Yes. Yeah, and with that kind of people power, like support, like we have a petition right now as well for our community garden. Kind of as we start, like as our organization in particular starts to do more guerrilla farming and gardening, we would love to have volunteers come out and also support to show the government organizations that people want this to happen. So we would love to have your support. Join our mailing list, check out our website, and yeah, we'll keep you connected.
Thank you guys so much. I'm gonna I just want to respect people's time. People got play evenings, but I'll be here. I'll be hanging out. Y'all are welcome to hang out and ask more questions. Or speakers, y'all are welcome to stay too. But want to respect people's times. Our last thing that we have on the docket right now, you said to. Yes. Oh, let's see. So the next thing on the docket is community announcements. So if we have anybody who's got stuff coming up that we need people at, events that we're excited about, the S2 has a couple things coming up, so we're just gonna open it up to community announcements. We're still open to questions. If people want to ask questions, we'll just double task. Yeah. Cool. So I just wanted to say, coming up on S2's end, we have our next Green Drinks is going to be a sailgate. And we're going to have two speakers, one of who is on our board, who is living on, who is living on their boat. We're going to be talking about circular economy work. And if you have, I think you have some more notes in here too. I see another question popping up as well. But if you have, I think you have more notes in front of you on our events. Hold on, you're muted.
Oh my gosh. Okay, is it working? Good. Yes, like Una said, our next event is Sailgate, which is basically like tailgating, but out on the water. So come out in your kayak, paddle out, sail out, whatever you need to do. But we want you to join us out on the water. It's also going to be available, like our usual Green Drinks, like this one this evening, on video. So you can also come from home or from your favorite green space or on the bay where you can look at the activity out on the water. If you need a boat, hit us up. We might be able to help hook you up with one. And we are going to be focusing, like Una said, on circular economy and the just transition framework. And we're going to be featuring some different community-based circular economy working organizations like the Refugee Artisan Initiative, the Basin Model, a lot of ground level BIPOC organizations, other frontline organizations that are participating in the circular economy work, which is a conversation that we don't see happening enough. And we're really lucky here in Seattle to have some really strong leadership around this. It's also going to be a fundraiser. So there's an opportunity, again, to distribute the wealth, but it will be available to attend for free. Too. And then in early September, we're going to be doing a Pacific Northwest intensive challenge. And in mid-September through October, we're going to be doing a challenge using bikes and non-fossil fuel-based forms of transportation around the region. And for the sake of time, I will let that go from Sustainable Seattle's end, but just keep an eye on us and we'll share about everything we have going on. We'd love to hear about what else is going on from many of our community members.
I have an event, and actually I see Bridget McNasser is here. She's going to help co-host this talk that it's free. It's called Native Plants of the Snoqualmie Valley. It's a part of a little program that we're doing out here to build relationships between farmers, community members, high school students, and the Snoqualmie tribe. And I'll put the link in the chat. It's in 2 weeks on Tuesday, the 28th at 7.
Yay, thank you. Also, please know you're welcome to post these things on our Green Drinks page, anybody, anytime, if you have stuff coming up. We're happy to promote it. Oh, dang, who's that? It's that time in the chat. Hold on, you're still muted, Marcus. I just want to know.
Buckwheat, yeah.
Buckwheat. Yay.
Farm dog.
Yeah.
So cute.
So I wanted to pop back in here. I want to give enough space. Does anybody else have a community announcement? There's one more question I'd love to read out, but does anyone else have an announcement in the meantime? All right, y'all are great. Appreciate you. So the question here I'm going to read, you can make it the last official question of the evening, is from Annie. And it says, in response to land access, has anyone worked with the American Farmland Trust? They have a program designed to make land accessible to new farmers by connecting them with aging farmers who don't have an inheritance plan. I haven't worked with them, so I can't vouch for that process, but could that be valuable to look into? Cool. Has anyone heard of that before? Sweet.
Yeah, I've heard of them. It sounds like a good opportunity. I think there's also there's a few resources similar to that. There's also another site, I can't remember the name of it, but you can actually buy land directly from farmers in a similar situation to that. I know that there's tons of organizations out there that are doing the work. I know that PCC's organization has a program in Skagit Valley that's similar. It's an incubator program for farmers. Sorry if I said that wrong. I'm still new to this area. It's an incubator program for farmers. There are plenty of amazing organizations out there. I think that the point is bringing that focus into BIPOC individuals and creating that access in particular is what we're asking for. So.
Cool. Yeah, absolutely. Oh, awesome. Well, thank you guys so much for staying a little bit later. I want to, just before we close out, just like give yourself a minute to remember that intention you set at the beginning. And just take a minute to feel how you did. And give yourself and the people here some gratitude for holding the space and contributing to it. And Thank you, Demarus and Marcus and Lizzy and Hannah, so much for being here. We're so excited to support your work. We're so excited to hear your wisdom. Yeah, I'm going to be here for a couple more minutes to chat. If people want to talk. People got more questions. Otherwise, we'll catch you around. There'll be info on the on our Facebook, and there'll be info on the rest of our social. Yeah, if there's any closing things you guys want to say, please feel free.
Thank you for having me. It was a fun panel to be on.
Yeah, thank you all. I hope you're cooking some amazing meals right now. So, please go get some fresh produce, make some delicious meals, get some medicine and get some rest. Love you all.
I'd also like to thank Sustainable Seattle for giving me an opportunity to talk and share my ideas. I'm always looking for places where I can speak about sustainability. So if you guys want to, check out my blog. I have like 3 entries on there. And one of them is called Happy Place. That's the one that I'm like the happiest about. So like that blog has all of my ideas, a little more romantic than what I said tonight, but yeah, I'm really glad to have this conversation with everyone and to listen to everyone's stories too, and to connect with you all. It's been really great. Thanks.
Thank you all so much. I have one little last piece of homework, and that is to speak to someone who wasn't here tonight. Ask them a question that came up for you. Talk to them about what you learned. Ask them if they've ever thought about it, if they've heard of anybody here, keep those circles, like we said, like people power is queen, keep those circles expanding. Thank y'all so much. You are officially, as always, free to go, but thank you so much for being here. Check back in soon. We host stuff every month. We've got S2 on air, which is bi-monthly. We've got all kinds of stuff going on. So please stay in touch. Hop on those mailing lists. Know that the work is happening and you just got to prioritize it.
Yeah. And I will just mention, we typically just like hang around. This is like our post event. We do it at our in-person green drinks. We do it at our virtual green drinks. We plan to just be here and just kick it. So we're not going to stop the meeting. You are welcome to join us and just kind of chat with us as long as we're here. And we usually try to stick around until the last person is ready to go because we really, really appreciate our community. So if you got a scoot, hit that little red, that little red phone icon. But if you want to stay, and let's just move. We can just like stop recording and kind of go off formal and just connect with each other as humans.